Hi, I'm Bob Gimlin. Like Bigfoot in North America, anomalous bipedal creatures have been reported with great frequency and by many names. An unknown primate in South America would share every advantage and more that their North American counterparts possess in terms of evading detection. And whether or not there exists a strong correlation to North American Sasquatch, or if they are somehow a uniquely South American phenomena, obviously, is yet to be determined. But one thing is certain. With so few reports from North America, it is miraculous that any come from South America. First, I will discuss Uku, more recently called Ucamar. The word Ucamar comes from the Quechua people, an aboriginal ethnic group indigenous to several regions of South America. In Quechua, Uku means body. Though as a cultural distinction, Uku does not mean body like a corpse or a physical abdomen. Uku means body as opposed to mind, or some may even say soul. So I think the logical root of the word Uku in application to these creatures is that they may possess human-like bodies, but clearly lack the human brain, mind, or soul, which makes sense, seeing as they seem to exist as no human being can. The month of May 1958, backpackers in Rango, Chile, reported a nocturnal encounter with a large man-like creature they settled on calling an, quote, ape man, that apparently lived in the Cordilleras. Among the party of campers was Carlos Manuel Soto. He contacted authorities in Santiago, Chile, to report his encounter with a creature in the Andes Mountains. He signed a legal affidavit attesting to the fact that he, quote, saw enormous ape men covered in hair in the Cordilleras that night. Much like Sasquatch reports in North America, Uku reports don't much bother with national boundaries. In 1956, on the Argentine side of the Cordilleras, a geologist named Audio Pitch found man-shaped 17-inch tracks at an elevation of 16,000 feet, which came as no surprise to the nearby residents of Toler Grande, who have been aware of the creature for quite some time. Newspaper reports tell of, quote, eerie calls emanating from the mountains at night. In 1979, anthropologist Sylvia Barrios, on a mission to preserve the tradition and knowledge of disappearing cultures, documented what locals called the Uku. They seem to agree that it lived in mountains of elevations where tropical vegetation flourish. Some farmers hear it scream at night. It likes to eat paya. The locals call it zunko, meaning thick and robust. It doesn't run, yet it moves fast. It never approaches people. It walks erect. Its hair is like a, quote, fleecy dog. It has distinct vocalizations like this. And I think it's worth noting that Albert Osman, the Canadian prospector who signed a legal affidavit that he was abducted by Sasquatch and held captive for 6 days, described this vocalization. Which is somewhat remarkable, seeing as these reports were made some 6,000 miles away from each other, yet both from montane forests. North of Chile and Argentina, identical reports of the Ucamar come from Guatemala, Belize, and Nicaragua. There they are called Sisamite, which in Quechua means watchers of the forest. Cultural anthropologist Michael Howard attempted to document and record native Quechua Mayan beliefs and customs before they become terminated by time. In his publication, Quechua Beliefs and Lore Regarding the Jungle, Volume 3, he writes that the Quechua Maya of Belize believe that life comes in 3 forms. First is the major deities, like alleged gods and elementals. They were never thought to be alive, as you or I would say, but they've always been here, and they always will be, according to lore. Second is the, quote, lesser class of local spirits. These are spirits, or as Howard writes, personifications, of that which is at one point mortal, and then became something else. And lastly, the physical realm, directly translated to those with the same relationship. These include, but are not limited to, quote, people, birds, tapir, jaguar, and sisamite. The Maya Quechua belief system is full of spirits, but apparently, sisamite was not considered to be one of them, which is curious, and reminiscent of North American aboriginals. See my video Sabe, Ojibwe Bigfoot for more information. Of course, not all reports are so limited by antiquity and mythos. In the 1950s, a geologist named Wendell Skousen wrote cryptozoologist Ivan Sanderson. The geologist said, when he was working in Guatemala, he heard stories of a creature called Sisamite. The locals describe, quote, wild men that live in the mountains, completely clothed in short, thick brown fur, with no necks, small eyes, long arms, and huge hands. They leave footprints, twice the size of a man's. They said through brush or at a distance, they can easily be mistaken for bear. But the giveaway is, quote, no conspicuous ears or snout. Geologist Wendell Skousen, quoted in Sanderson's book Abominable Snowmen, 1961. In Guyana, Suriname, and Venezuela, they call the creature Didi. As a point of reference, Guyana alone is roughly the size of Idaho. It is one of the richest countries in the world in terms of biodiversity. It holds some of the largest and healthiest populations of giant anteater, jaguar, ocelot, puma, tapir, howler and spider monkey, giant storks and raptors, these giant hamsters, anaconda, and particularly feared by locals, giant river otter, larger than most German shepherds, with a predilection for flipping boats. And to the east of Guyana is Suriname. 80% of Suriname consists of tropical rainforest. Just one of Suriname's protected areas is the Central Suriname Nature Reserve, which is over 1.5 million hectares, which is larger than Connecticut. Just one reserve in one country, on a continent, with a particularly impenetrable environment. May 1987, a mycologist named Gary Samuels was collecting and cataloging fungus in Guyana when he heard human-like steps moving through leaf litter. Samuels was quite unnerved by this, because the rest of his group was on the other side of the river, and he had the boat. Samuels expected to see a forester, which I'm sure he wasn't terribly thrilled about, but instead he saw what he called a, quote, upright ape, though it was just over 5 feet tall, walking parallel to the river's edge. Samuels stated that it was clearly aware of him. The creature accelerated, yet it did not run, or break its stride. He spoke with journalist Patrick Hugh about the sighting. Samuel said, quote, it was one of those situations where your brain runs through every possibility it knows and comes up blank. This was nothing I had ever seen or heard of. Locals told him that he had seen an animal called the Didi, and that they aren't even particularly rare. Guyana and Suriname are desolate, pristine, and largely impenetrable, except for waterways. If this planet still holds mysteries, there are some here. In Brazil, they call it Mapinguari. I should immediately note that a well-intentioned, if not misguided, biologist named David Oren published a bunch of stuff that got picked up by a lot of sources on how the Mapinguari is a near-extinct ground sloth. Many of the sources say Megatherium, though I doubt that, seeing as Megatherium was larger than an African elephant at over 4 tons. More likely than Megatherium would be Megalonyx, a giant ground sloth that maxed out at just under 10 feet long and weighing a couple thousand pounds. And this is a halfway decent representation of Megalonyx erect, at least in terms of scale. And I'm conflicted on this. Out of all the prehistoric relics that could possibly be hanging around undetected, ground sloths seem to be one of the least likely. Sloths were by no stretch of the imagination fast, and I doubt they were big on retreating or problem-solving, which is a hallmark of anomalous bipedal creatures today. Both Megatherium and Megalonyx probably went extinct about 10,000 years ago. That being said, if something prehistoric still lurked on this planet without our knowing, my money would be on Indonesia, Southeast Asia, Central Africa, or here in South America. Not to mention the North. Anyhow, the first Western record of Mapinguari comes from Dr. Edward Bancroft, and his opinion is to be respected. In 1763, he left his Connecticut home to become a physician for the laborers at a sugarcane plantation in Guyana. He was the first Westerner to clarify that then called American eels, now called electric eels, actually use pulses of energy to navigate, attack, and defend. Until Bancroft's findings in 1760, modern Western scientists maintained that American eels used, quote, imperceptibly swift mechanical action. I'm sure people in Europe laughed at the notion of some kind of lightning fish. Bancroft, a close friend of Benjamin Franklin, would later go on to be a double spy in the American Revolution. In his book, Natural History of Guyana, Bancroft records descriptions of a creature that he assumed to be nothing more than a 5-foot-tall ape with dark hair. Bancroft makes no mention of any skepticism or mysticism behind the creature. He was aware that this new world is full of new things. Scientists like Bancroft, back in the 1760s, had no reason to discount such creatures because they were positive there was still so much to find in out-of-the-way places, off the beaten trail, and I think we forgot that somewhere along the line. It wouldn't be the first time something unusual and unprecedented was revealed from this part of the world. Didi, Sisamite, Mapinguari, Uku, Orang Pendek, Sasquatch, Yeti, Almas, Oma, Skunk Ape, Yowie, Nukluk, Yeren, Kitrao, Michi, Boonmanchi, Sabe, Kitrao, Kushtaka. Why are there so many names and sightings of something that isn't real? I don't know. Must be pareidolia. Seriously though, trust me, there is nothing random happening here. Anyhow, thanks an awful lot for listening.